Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Snappy Cappy. Today is going to be a spooky episode. And we're going to be talking about some different spooky things, like my favorite spooky video games. I'll talk about some of my favorite spooky books. And then at the end, we'll tell a few spooky stories. Does that sound like a good idea?
Yeah.
Okay. So we'll start out with the video games because recently the Silent Hill 2 remake just came out, and that's what I've been playing for the past couple of days. I'm not too far into the game. I just made it into the Blue Water Creek Apartments. I think that's what the area is called.
Something like that.
Something like that. Yeah. I never played the original Silent Hill 2. Did you ever play it?
I did not. I actually started with a different Silent Hill game. A different Silent Hill game. Silent Hill Homecoming.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, that's where my Silent Hill journey kind of began.
Okay. Yeah, I never played the original. Oh my god, we can't talk today.
Can't talk today.
The original Silent Hill 2. But I think that so far the remake really does justice to the original story and the original game. A lot of people are saying that it's like, oh, it's PS2 graphics or it runs horribly and, the characters look terrible. But I think that the atmosphere is there. The characters look really great. Of course, it's not like Unreal Engine 5 level detail, but I think that's the beauty of horror games. Like, they kind of look and feel better when the graphics aren't the best.
Yeah, I was actually going to say, first of all, the game looks gorgeous. I don't understand where people are getting this notion. It's like, it's PlayStation 2 graphics. They're really not. It's a really nice looking game. But yeah, newer horror games with super crazy graphics, they just don't feel the same as older, PS1, PS2, even PS3 era horror games. Just the atmosphere is just kind of off if it's too photorealistic.
Yeah, but I think a lot of these complaints are coming from PC players, which I will say, playing the game on PS5, it runs beautifully. Some of the dark areas are a little too dark, but and again, that kind of adds to the atmosphere. Like, it's supposed to be confusing. It's supposed to, make you feel like you're isolated, make you feel like there's something lurking in the dark, which there's lots of things lurking in the dark.
It's kind of panic-inducing when you're just kind of like walking by. Excuse me. You're walking down a hallway. Suddenly there's a little corner, and then boom, something's just there.
Yeah.
Especially because you can't see farther than 5 feet in front of you. So
yeah, definitely. I would say this is one of the first horror games in a long time that has actually kind of kept me on my toes. I don't get scared very often. I haven't had anything actually like scare me in the game, but it's just like the panicked feeling of like, I don't want to die, so I have to make sure I do everything that I can to not die.
Yeah, you just have that thought racing through your mind, like, oh God, when did I last save?
Yeah,
that's the panic. I
the
think.
Survival mode brain turned on.
Yeah.
But that's what I really like about the game. I feel like nowadays most quote unquote horror games are geared more towards the storytelling side or like the survival horror side, to where it's like, okay, I know I'm going to have a constant amount of resources for me to either kill like the enemies or escape, but this is like one of those horror games where it's like, I don't know if I'm going to have enough resources. I don't really know where I'm going. I don't know if I'm going to have like a moment to check my map because something can come out at any moment.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's kind of like where the Resident Evil games are kind of getting a little, not boring, because they are still pretty interesting, but it's going less to the horror side and more to the action side.
Yeah, and that's been a pretty big trend with Resident Evil. Like, once you got past Resident Evil 3, Resident Evil 4 is really where most of the action really started, I think.
Mm-hmm.
But
But yeah, I think it does a really good job at staying true to like the source game, but also improving on certain things to where it makes things look more gross, more disgusting, more just like you really don't want to be there, but you have no option.
Yeah. Just, ugh.
So yeah, I think that's pretty good.
Yeah. Would you say that Silent Hill 2 is one of your favorite horror games at this point in time?
I would say, yeah, definitely.
Right on.
I would put it, actually, I think I would put it above like the Quarry and all of that. But that's more like a story game. I kind of put those in two different
categories. Of like horror. You know. Honestly, I would have to say that I've never actually played the game, but I would say, and I can tell this story later on when we're actually telling stories, but Resident Evil 3 Nemesis, the original one, is one of my favorite games. And again, it's not because I actually played the original, it's just because like it's kind of a funny story, but yeah.
It's actually on my list of games to talk about, so you can talk about the story when we get to Resident Evil 3.
Oh, okay, sweet.
Yeah.
I'm just jumping the gun a little bit. Whoops.
The next game that's on the list is Outlast.
Oh God, Outlast.
And I think you have a little bit more experience with Outlast than I do.
Well, I've seen a full playthrough of the original Outlast, the first Outlast with Markiplier, and then it's just gross. Like, it's very heavily implied, very big sexual themes. It's everyone's just crazy. Essentially what it is you're in an insane asylum where they're doing like experiments on people to try to achieve some sort of, I can't remember it completely, but they're like trying to find some sort of entity. So you are actually a reporter, and you get captured and blah, blah, blah. They do experiments on you, and you have to go around the map, the asylum, pretty much with just your camera. There's no combat mechanics. You just have to run and hide, and pretty much everyone is just trying to kill you.
Yeah, it's a really horrible game of hide and seek.
Yeah, especially because, I forget his name, but one of the main antagonists, he just follows you around the map, almost like Nemesis, or, when he does capture you, he like tears you in half and stuff. It's a very creepy game, so to speak. It works more on your anxiety. Yeah. Because again, no combat mechanics. You can't fight your way out.
Yeah, it's more survival than Silent Hill because, like you said, you can't do anything to defend yourself.
Yeah.
You have to either run or you either have to hide or you're going to die.
Yep.
And it's the same thing. Like, the whole asylum is like rickety, falling apart. It's disgusting because there's just blood and body parts everywhere.
There's a guy in a corner eating a leg or something.
Yeah. All of the characters that you encounter in the game are like mutants, basically. And I think this is the second game, though, but I was going to say a lot of it kind of reminds me of House of a Thousand Corpses.
Gotcha.
Just like crazy cannibals living in the middle of nowhere.
Yep. Yeah, that's Outlast 2, which I never really wanted to see a playthrough of Outlast 2 because, sexual assault is like heavily implied.
Yeah, that is a very heavy topic that's explored in the second game. And, a lot of people are sensitive to that kind of stuff. Like, essentially the Outlast games, if you can think about the worst crime that anyone can ever commit, it's probably in the Outlast games.
Yeah.
And you actually see it in the game. Like, those games are not for the faint of heart.
Yeah, it's definitely, a lot of it can actually make you, like, your stomach just, like, completely drop. I know there's worse games out there.
Yeah, there's a lot worse games out there.
If you're not prepared for it, it can definitely, like, kind of hit you.
Yeah.
It's pretty bad.
It's brutal. The next one is the Saw video game.
You're going to have to tell me a bit more on that one. I've seen the movies, but...
Yeah, so for anyone that doesn't know about, like, the Saw franchise, it is based upon there is a retired engineer named John Kramer who was inspired to put people into basically torture devices when a drug addict caused his wife to have a miscarriage late in her pregnancy. And to kind of give these people a second chance at life, he decided to make torture devices that were escapable to make them kind of rethink their lives. Like before the whole thing would start, he would tell them, like, you know, here's all the crimes that you committed, here are all the bad things that you've done to other people. Like, this trap is based off of like something that you did, and I'm going to give you a second chance at life. If you can escape it, you live. If you don't, well, you die. Like, it's a very extreme form of justice, basically.
Oh gosh.
And the Saw video games very loosely follow that story. The games are kind of like their own thing. They're not based on the movies at all.
Oh, okay.
They have, you know, like they have John Kramer, they have the other characters, but it's not based on the movies. And basically in the game, you have to try and escape these traps by, like, you know, button mashing or figuring out different puzzles. So it's like a puzzle horror game.
Okay.
But also kind of survival, because you have to go through like this whole facility to try and escape different traps. But the controls in that game are so bad. I mean, it's like any other PS2 game that had like a small budget. Like, it wasn't very well done at all.
That's fair.
And the controls were really bad. I remember, I think it was in the second game, but you had to go through like this corridor, and it had two like saw blades that came down and like swung across, and you had to like, it was a quick time event.
Oh, okay.
But anytime you press the buttons, it would never register that you had pressed the buttons.
Aww.
So you couldn't pass that part in the game. So yeah, I never finished the game because it was physically impossible to do so.
It was just a game-breaking bug in there.
Yeah. And there were also kind of like other people that you had to fight in the game, which was really weird because...
Odd.
That didn't make sense to put in there.
You don't really see people just straight up brawling in the Saw movies, but...
Yeah, it's like, I know in the movies, like, there's disagreements between people that are put in together.
Yeah.
But they were like in the much later movies, which I don't like to call them canon because they kind of ruin story at that point, but it is what it is. So yeah, it wasn't really a scary game. It was just bloody, just kind of like the movies.
Just loads of crimson everywhere.
Yeah, but it was not a good game. None of the two games were very good.
If we end up getting bigger and some Saw fan finds this video, we're gonna have so many comments.
I think most people would agree that it was just
terrible.
Game. Yeah.
Yeah, you know, lots of games have their cult following. But...
Yeah. The next game is Mortal Kombat Trilogy.
Oh, fun.
Which was Mortal Kombat 3, but they just added more stuff to it. Did you ever play Mortal Kombat 3?
I don't think I've ever played the third one. I think it was Mortal Kombat 2, if I'm not mistaken. I played when I was a lot younger, but yeah, I don't think I've ever played 3, so.
Okay. It's pretty much the same as
formula.
2. Excuse me. It was pretty much the same as 2, except there was a much larger selection of characters. You know, you had the new female ninjas like Melina, you had Tanya, you had... Oh yeah, I don't know if Tanya was in that game. No, Tanya was introduced in 4. Never mind.
Gotcha.
But I think a lot of male ninjas were introduced to, like Ermac, Noob, Reptile.
Was it in Mortal Kombat 3 with Noob? I thought it was in 2.
I think it's 2, but I think 3 is where they kind of like finalize him as a long-term character.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So yeah, just Rain was another one.
Oh, nice.
Loads of new characters. The only reason why I put it on the list is because just the atmosphere of that game used to creep me out as a kid.
Oh, yeah.
If you go back, which they have it on YouTube, if you go back and you listen to the soundtrack of that game, it's just so creepy.
All right, so if you want a creepy soundtrack this Halloween, definitely look up this one.
Yeah, just use the Mortal Kombat trilogy soundtrack because it's like very creepy, kind of gives you the chills down your spine. There's some of like the action-y sounding soundtracks for like the train station level that are a little bit more upbeat and like, you know, like the first game, but this one really is just
It's kind of creepy.
super creepy. And a lot of the arenas that you fight in are really creepy too, like the dungeon one, because there's just like skulls and bones everywhere and chains hanging down. Like,
Lovely.
Like, okay, yep, I'm gonna die here.
Especially when you're fighting, you know, what's his name, Goro?
Well, Goro, Kintaro, Motaro.
I completely forgot about those guys. Anyway.
It was just a short one that I had there, but yeah.
Oh, no, yeah,
primarily
definitely.
soundtrack and just like the stages.
Right, because if I remember correctly, it has like a sewer stage, right? Where like the edges are like acid and stuff.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, see, weird, creepy.
Mm-hmm.
But I definitely have to listen to that soundtrack now.
Yes. And then now Resident Evil 3.
Yes, Resident Evil 3. Yeah, Resident Evil, especially like the earlier adaptations, the earlier games, were just super creepy. And it doesn't help that I was a kid through all of it, so it just made it that much worse. But I don't know if I've told this story before, but there was one time my cousin, he was telling me he was playing Resident Evil 3, and of course, I think it was like a pirated version of the game or whatever. So he couldn't read anything. So he would just roam around the game, do what he was doing, and I don't think he ever had a memory card. Mm-hmm. So he would just like go through as far as he could.
Yeah.
But the first time he encountered Nemesis, I think he was playing and it was dark, and Nemesis just randomly pops out at you.
Yeah.
So poor guy, he just like threw his controller and just ran out of the room. So, and again, I never played the original Resident Evil 3, but I can say that is one of my favorite video games, like horror video games, just because of that.
Yeah, I think everyone who kind of grew up in that time or even a little bit after that has very similar experiences playing, you know, the original Resident Evil game or like Dino Crisis, any like old horror Capcom game, because they were kind of like the godfathers of survival horror.
Yeah.
So yeah, that I had a similar experience with Resident Evil 2, but my dad was playing the game, and I was just like, I don't want to look at that anymore. It's just too creepy.
Yeah, my first Resident Evil game ever was actually Resident Evil 0. Mm-hmm. It was fun. I just hated the tank movement in it. Tank controls. Yeah, but I'm not that good at horror. So if it was a dark corridor, I would sit there just with the controller in my hand for like 20 minutes, just staring down the corridor, deciding if I wanted to move or not.
Yeah, so when I was younger, I never actually finished like any of the original Resident Evil games. Like, you know, 15 years later, now that it's on PS5, I'm finally going to try and beat Dino Crisis because it's my favorite survival horror games of all time. But I've just never had the chance to beat it. The times that I played it before, I was too young to understand what was going on.
Well, that's fair.
But I love the characters. I love the atmosphere. It reminds me so much of like the old. Um, wow, I just drew a blank. The old Jurassic Park movies, like when they actually used to be brutal.
Oh yeah.
So yeah.
Fun times. Fun times.
Now times. Okay. Again, we can't talk today.
Yeah, today's been weird.
Now we're going to talk about some books. And now you're not much of a book person, but
hey,
talk about some books.
I want to hear about some books. Heck yeah.
Cool. So the first book that I'm going to talk about is called Tender is the Flesh.
Starting off strong. Okay.
Yes, starting off really horribly. I can't remember the author of the book, but if you just type up Tender is the Flesh book, you'll find it right away. Like,
okay.
It's pretty unmistakable. It's a black book, and it has like a red and pink girl on the front with horns.
Yeah, I'm actually going to look this up because that sounds like an interesting cover.
Yeah, it's very monochrome. Is that the right term? Not monochrome. Maybe it is the right term, but
it's a novel by Augustina. Oh my god, I don't. Basterica? Basterica?
Yes.
Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah. So I'm not gonna give any spoilers, but the basic premise of the book is it's in a time where it has become illegal to butcher cows for meat consumption.
Okay.
And the world has become overpopulated with people that they've decided to have human meat farms and processing plants instead. So they kind of took like the worst, most quote unquote unintelligent part of the population. And that's kind of how they started the whole process. And this guy, he works for a human meat processing plant. And while his wife is away, he falls in love with one of the women that is supposed to be butchered.
Okay.
Yeah. And so he takes her back to his house, does all these things, and because she can't speak or she can't understand what's going on, she kind of has no say in what's happening. And he eventually gets her pregnant, all these things, and it's just a really crazy story.
Wow, okay.
Yeah. So it's like you get like the weirdness of trying to think about cannibalism, essentially, like legalized cannibalism, while this guy is like doing all these things with a woman that can't communicate anything to him.
That just sounds like a whole lot of fun.
Yeah, a lot of people are like, this is probably the most messed up book I've ever read. But it's also very short, so it packs in a lot of, just like traumatic experience and horror and craziness in like 200 pages.
Oh, dang.
Yeah.
It's a whole lot of story with not a whole lot of room.
Yeah.
Wow, okay.
Yeah. So yeah, like I said, starting off really strong.
Yeah, it sounds like an interesting book, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah, in the event anybody's interested in reading it, there you go. Tender is the Flesh.
Yes. The next book is Fahrenheit 451 by Ray Bradbury.
Okay.
It's a classic. I'm sure a lot of people have already read it by now. And it is not necessarily a horror book, but the thing that makes it kind of creepy to me is that it is something that could happen in our lifetime.
Okay.
And I don't want to get political with it because I know a lot of people can get kind of political when talking about this book. But the basic premise of the book is it's set far into the future, or at least far into the future when the book was written. And firefighters have transitioned from extinguishing fires to starting fires. Their job is to start fires. And they like start people's houses on fire, or just people in general, if they are caught with books. And in this world that they're living in, the government wants to keep all of their citizens happy. And they found that books made people very unhappy, but that's because books would tell the truth about history and different things.
Right.
So they figured that anybody who was trying to educate themselves with books was trying to make the population unhappy. So that's why they would start them on fire.
Oh.
Yeah. And then, like, in their houses, they have, like, these gigantic TV screens. Like, one wall will be a TV, and they would kind of, like, promote propaganda and stuff like that on TV. But, like, that's what kept the people in check, so to speak.
Gotcha.
What kept them happy. And one of the firefighters that the whole book is about meets this girl who introduces him to books. And of course, because it's his job, at first he's scared to read books, but then he finally decides to read one and realizes that life is so much more than what's being offered to them.
Huh.
So yeah.
Okay.
It's very interesting.
Now that you said how they have essentially one wall that's a TV, have you heard of the Samsung TV called The Wall?
The Wall TV, yeah.
So they predicted one thing, right? Mm-hmm. But still, that's pretty heavy. It's definitely something that can happen, you know, whole book burnings and stuff.
Yeah, and again, I don't want to go far into like politics or anything like that, but if you do some research, like things like that are already starting to happen.
Yeah.
Not in the extreme, but
excuse me.
You know, on a smaller scale. So that's kind of why I added it into the list of like horror, because it's like it's something that's progressively starting to become more realistic.
Yeah. And nothing's scarier than, you know, something that could actually happen and you start seeing it. Mm-hmm. It's terrifying. Anyway.
Yeah. The next one is, which it also kind of falls into the category of video games, but Corpse Party Blood Covered.
Okay.
It's a very short manga series. It's 6 books, but each book is like, 300 pages or something? They're pretty thick.
I think I need to read more books because 300 pages sounds massive.
It sounds massive. But because it's a manga, it's not too bad. It's mostly pictures.
Okay, well, yeah, maybe I should start reading more mangas then.
Yeah. And for anybody that doesn't know what Corpse Party is, it's a story about a group of Japanese high school friends who set up like a festival for their class. And at the end of the festival, one of their friends announces that it was their last day at that school and that they were moving. And one of their friends is really into like occult magic. And they decided a good thing to do is a friendship charm called Sachiko Ever After.
Okay.
So they have a paper doll that everyone's supposed to hold on to, and they chant Sachiko Ever After as many times as there are people doing the charm. And then at the end of the charm, they rip the pieces of the doll apart and they have to keep their piece of the doll. What they didn't know, though, is that the original person who was doing research on that charm put the wrong instructions in it.
Oh, no.
Yeah. So they did the charm, and they fall into a nexus that is composed of a school that was torn down, buried, and their current school was built above it. And it's like this whole other world, but they meet like ghosts of all the children that have died there and learn about the history of the old elementary school while also trying to survive and escape that school. So yeah, very creepy.
Yeah.
If you know anything about the Corpse Party games or the mangas, it's very brutal. It's very gory, very intense.
Yeah, I've seen a bit of the games, and it's like normally because it's it's 2D in the video games, but then you actually try to inspect something, screen goes dark, comes back, and all of a sudden it's like somebody that's like been ripped apart limb by limb. You're just seeing the aftermath.
Yeah, there's even a portion where one of the students gets slammed into the wall by two of the ghosts, and like it doesn't look like anything because it's like 8-bit 2D, but then you go up and inspect it, and it's just like right there in front of you. Yep. No imagination needed.
Yeah, with only like very little censorship, I think. Yeah. If any at all, really.
Yeah, I know at one point, because I think the original game came out in like 1990, and they tried to censor it at that time, but because Japan's rules on censorship wasn't as harsh as they are now, they couldn't really do much about it.
Right.
So yeah.
Which kind of begs the question, is it like the versions that we can get here, is that not really what it looks like in Japan?
That's interesting. I don't know about Corpse Party just because there hasn't been a Corpse Party game that has come out in a while. But I do know when the Resident Evil 2 remake came out, you know the part where that gate kind of like comes down on that one guy and you pull his body out and you can see kind of like everything hanging out. Yep. In the Japanese version now, there's no blood, nothing. There's just the top half of his torso.
Oh. Also, it's very censored.
Yeah, so the remake is heavily censored in Japan. So I can imagine with something like Corpse Party, if the creators ever decide to make a new one, it's going to be pretty heavily censored. As opposed to here in the US, it's
probably going to get rid of the high-res pictures that they, kind of put in there every now and again.
Yeah, but as far as I know, the version that you can get on Steam, as well as the version on PlayStation, they're still the original game, so...
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Huh. For some odd reason, I thought that was a newer release, but...
The newest release was on, weirdly enough, Switch.
Oh!
But it's, like, basically unplayable, so...
Oh, great.
And it's 3D, like, chibi-fied. So it's not as scary or gruesome.
That's fair. Okay.
Yeah. Started talking more about the game, but the books are pretty much the same. And then my last one is anything by Junji Ito.
Oh, God. Yeah.
Yeah, Junji Ito is a manga artist / writer, and he mostly focuses on horror, primarily body horror. The most recent manga of his that I read was Tome, which is, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, but it's a bunch of short stories about a woman named Tome who comes into people's lives just to ruin their life.
Oh.
Yeah.
Fun.
And she can never die. Like, just her existence, like, is meant to drive people to such extreme anger to where they murder her. but she comes back to life every single time and just makes things horrible. She either, drives the person to
Okay.
by themselves or to like kill someone else, different things. But yeah, her existence is just to drive people to insanity.
Fun.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I saw some of the artwork in that book, and it looks just super creepy.
It's really creepy. It's really gross. Um, those like gooey, oily looking creatures in Resident Evil 8? Or is it Resident Evil 7? They're just like goopy and gooey and
I honestly cannot remember, but I know it's one of them.
But yeah, there's like a lot of art like that in that book because she like kind of liquefies herself.
Oh.
And then like multiplies.
Oh.
Yeah, it's just really weird. And then the other one that I read is it To Be Human or To Become Human or something like that.
Okay.
Yeah, that one's pretty disturbing too. It's one long story that was based off of a regular novel from another Japanese writer, but that one's really disturbing because it again is it's based off of a lot of like really touchy sexual themes, and it's very graphic.
Okay.
That one definitely like made my stomach upset when I was reading it.
Oh, I'm sure. Oh, yeah. Man. Okay.
If you like horror manga, definitely check out anything by Junji Ito. Like, very great artist.
Yeah, and definitely sounds like it. I mean, again, I've seen a little bit of his work, and it is good artwork. Mm-hmm. But God, it's creepy.
Yeah. And then time for some spooky stories.
Sure. Who do you want to go first?
Do you want to go first?
I mean, mine's more funny than it is spooky anyway, but...
That's okay.
So, there was one time, I was younger, I was maybe like 13 at the time, 13, 14. Mm-hmm. And I was trying to fall asleep. It was in the middle of the night, it was probably midnight, give or take a couple hours. But I had a lava lamp that I would keep on because it was relatively, it wasn't very bright, and it was just nice to look at when I woke up.
Yeah, nice and soothing.
So I'm already starting to fall asleep, and my lava lamp flickers. So I'm like, that's creepy. So I turn the other way. As I'm starting to fall asleep again, I hear the light bulb in the lava lamp flicker again. And I'm like, you know what, I'll just turn it off in the morning. I'm really tired. I'm just going to go to sleep. Excuse me. Next thing I know, it feels like something pinches my butt. Which within itself, it's pretty funny. But it gets creepy when I hop out of bed and it's suddenly, like 1 o'clock in the morning. Everyone's asleep. There's no one else in my room. Mm-hmm. So, yeah. Pretty sure a ghost pinched me in the butt.
That is pretty creepy.
Yeah.
Okay. The first kind of spooky story that I have to tell is before I was born, like basically right before I was born, my parents had a friend that passed away. And when I was like 3 or 4 years old, I can't remember, I'd have to ask my mom again, we visited his grave. And I guess at some point, because it was kind of nighttime, it was getting dim, getting dark, being in a graveyard at night is a little creepy. But I guess I suddenly started laughing.
Oh.
Yeah. And my parents were like, well, what's so funny? Like, what are you laughing at? And I was like, oh, someone's tickling me. Like somebody's like trying to play a game with me. And then I kept laughing and I was like, oh, they're tickling my feet now.
Oh, fun.
Yeah, and so along with that, when I was the same age too, I used to sleep in my parents' room most of the time. And there was a specific corner of their room that I'd always stare at and like talk to. And it's that corner kind of like where the bathroom door is in their room.
Right.
Yeah, I would like talk to that corner of their room.
Okay.
Yeah.
See, that corner of the room always kind of creeped me out a little bit, and I never knew why.
And it's also weird too, because if you look at that corner of the room, it's always darker than the rest of the room.
Yeah. Okay, I'm gonna stop thinking about that real quick.
But yeah, my parents were like, oh, like our friend is probably like trying to mess with you or something. Because if I was a boy, they were going to name me after him.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why my middle name is Andrea, because his name is Andrew.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So they're like, you must have like some kind of weird connection.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
I have another one. So again, it's a little funny, but my cousin and I, we used to like to listen to, scary stories, especially around this time, Halloween. Mm-hmm. Granted, we were young, like 9-10 years old, and we were listening to this one story where something along the lines happens to this one little boy. Mm-hmm. And at the very end of the story, it talks about how he appears in an arched window inside of a house, right? Yeah. Like you could see it's a full moon, you could see the kid's shadow and everything, and he says something super creepy. At the time, I was spending the night and we were at my grandmother's house. And she had a big window with an arch in front of it. Mm-hmm. And it had a really light blinds on it. Mm-hmm. So once we heard that, which it was a new story that we were listening to, both me and my cousin look at that arch, look at each other, and immediately we're like, yeah, I'm going to go to bed. It was just, yeah. Like, I don't know, after we heard that, at least within me, I felt some weird thing.
It's like weird energy.
Yeah, it was just super creepy, but it's kind of funny when you think about it. Like, haha, two kids are listening to scary stories, and suddenly this whole thing happens, and it's like just right there.
Yeah. My second story is, it always has to deal with somebody that I'm close to dying, and I'm sorry, but that's just kind of how my life goes. It was a couple of months after my grandpa on my mom's side passed away. We lived right next to them. Like, their house is right in front of my parents' house. So we interacted with my grandparents like all the time. And for context, my grandpa liked to garden. He always grew chili. He always grew corn, jalapenos, the works. Like traditional New Mexican man who likes to garden.
Right.
And he always used to wear overalls when he was gardening. Because, comfortable, durable, all that good stuff. And I was home alone. I had all the doors locked that day. And I decided to go take a shower in my parents' bathroom. So, I gathered my clothes, all that good stuff, closed the door to the bathroom, started up the shower, all that good stuff. And while I was washing my hair, I heard the bathroom door open. And from the corner, excuse me, from the corner of my eye, because I, sudsy hair, didn't want to get bubbles or anything in my eyes.
Right.
I see a man in overalls and like a hat on, walk into the bathroom, look at me, and then keep walking to where my parents' bathtub is. And then it walked out and the bathroom door closed again. So I panicked. I was like, did someone just walk into the bathroom to stare at me while I'm showering? Like, that's weird.
Yeah.
So, like, I washed my hair, turned off the shower, got dressed super fast. Everything was the exact same way that I left it.
That is creepy.
The doors were locked. The windows were closed. Nothing had been touched. It was the exact same way. And we've always had dogs. Like, we've always had big dogs. If someone was around, especially someone that they didn't know, like, they would have started going crazy. But nothing, like, the dogs were fine.
Creepy.
Yeah, like, you know how Molly is. Molly is a Chihuahua, by the way, but...
Yeah, she's the loudest one out of the bunch.
Yeah, she's the loudest, most obnoxious one. So if anyone was there, she would have been going off. But, like, nothing was happening.
Huh. Yeah, that's odd. Another story that I have, this one's actually like kind of creepy, but of course, middle of the night, I was a rebel child. I didn't fall asleep. It was like 2 a.m. So I'm laying in bed and I have my headphones in, but I was hearing somebody like screaming, like just one loud scream, a woman scream. Mm-hmm. So I pause my music and I take off my headphones and I hear it again, but it sounds like it's way off in the distance. I don't know what drove me to kind of like get up and walk towards my window. And as I was walking to my window, I heard the same scream, but this time it sounded like it was right outside my window. So I freeze, I stop, and I wait for it again. Didn't hear anything. I looked outside, nothing was going on. I stayed awake for about another hour and a half trying to see if anybody was like running around outside the house or what it was. Mm-hmm. And I didn't know if anybody else heard it. So a bit of time goes on and I fall asleep. And when I wake up, I ask did anybody else hear that scream last night? Nobody knew what the heck I was talking about, but I heard it right outside my window.
That's creepy.
Yeah. And it was 3 screams. It was a female scream, like if she was just like getting hunted by something. Just a blood-curdling scream. Ew. Yeah, I wasn't sure if I wanted to sleep in that room again.
That's fair. I probably wouldn't want to either. I don't know if I have another story, especially because like all of my like scary / creepy life stories are like really traumatic.
That's fair.
I don't want to traumatize people.
That's fair. Do you have anything else that you wanted to talk about?
Not that I can think of.
Right on.
I know that I remember you telling me the story like a while back, but that you and your sister had a pretty creepy experience with the graveyard behind the house.
Oh gosh. Honestly, I can't even remember.
I think you guys said that you saw like glowing red eyes coming from...
Oh yeah, at the church.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it was literally at one of the windows.
In the church, it was like...
I believe so, yeah.
Yeah, no, that's horrifying.
Yeah, I mean, I can't remember exactly because it was so long ago. Mm-hmm. But I do recall seeing, remembering those eyes. But yeah, I think it was like a summer night or something, and we're hanging out outside. It's dark, we're with my grandpa and stuff. And yeah, we're looking over at the church, and you just see red. It's 2 red eyes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't like that.
Yeah, weird stuff happens in this neck of the woods, but...
Yeah. So that's all that I can really think of. That's all that I have. This is probably going to be our longest episode yet. So thank you guys for sticking with us and listening to, our favorite spooky stuff.
Yeah.
Just in time for spooky season. Considering that it's getting cooler outside and thinking of some different fun things that we can do for the podcast, I was thinking that, maybe one of these nights that we're gonna have a day off, we can set up um, like a visual podcast, be
Sure.
hanging out outside at the fire pit and just talking about whatever topic we think of that day. How does that sound?
I think it's a great idea, but if anybody out there listening also agrees, just leave us a comment. If you think that's something that you would like, that you would, want to see, or hear in this case.
Yeah. Watch / listen to.
Yeah, let us know. Excuse me. Also on that note, if you let us know what you think. Do you like shorter episodes? Do you think we should do longer episodes? Definitely let us know.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you, and we will see you again in the next video.
But wait. Before that, don't forget to check out Immortal Create. I unfortunately have yet to receive the stuff that was sent to us, but definitely we'll, add some of the products, at least some pictures of them in one of these coming videos. That way you guys can kind of see what's done in the process.
Yeah, so, for sure.
Yeah, the final product. Mm-hmm. But yeah, definitely check out Immortal Create.
Bye.
Bye.